Good evening, councillors, and welcome to councillors' officers and guests to the Council's Development Assessment Committee for Wednesday the 15th of February. Councillors, we've all got all councillors in attendance, so there's no apologies. Just a reminder that in accordance with Council's governance rules, this meeting will be live streamed. So if you need to speak, please turn your microphone on, and those registered to speak, you'll be invited to take the table in front of us and please press the button to speak. Just ask if there's any matters, councillors, arising from the previous minutes. No? Yeah. Confirmation? Confirmation of the previous minutes, yes. Wednesday the 15th of December. So moved, Councillor Sullivan. Second to Councillor Minari. All in favour? Carried. And I'll again call for matters arising, of which there were none. Councillors, I will call for disclosures of conflicts of interest for tonight's meeting. Any items? No. Okay. So item 7.1 is the development and use of a dwelling and ancillary shed at Tinney's Road, Dunstown. Councillor, we have a registered speaker. I'd like to invite Mr Neil Hayden to take the table. Now, councillors, Neil has also put in a written submission which has been tabled, so I will ask before Neil starts, is there any questions regarding the written submission? No, so noted. Neil, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mr Chairman. My name's Neil Hayden and I represent the permit applicant Carl Bedgeby. So Carl apologises that this matter was deferred from the December meeting last year because he couldn't attend, but he's here tonight with me. But the application essentially is for the use and development of a dwelling on about 10.8 hectares, which is sort of 20 acres in the old terms that some of us still refer to. It's in Dunstown, and it's sort of in a situation where it's sort of surrounded by, I'll say, sort of houses on similar sized lots. So the context is sort of a rural living style of context, I suppose, in a physical sense around the subject site. The proposal is to use the site. It's actually two titles, councillors, at the moment. So one of the good aspects of this application is that two titles are offered to be consolidated together to form one lot, and that's always a good farming outcome if you're sort of making, sort of farms bigger, if you like. But essentially the application is for the use of a dwelling, and associated with that, Mr Bedgeby and his father have been quite good at rearing potty calves or calves sort of for certainly heifer replacements, and certainly Mr Bedgeby has a relationship with, I'll call it a success story business in that area, the Inglenook Dairy, so sort of replacement heifers and so forth that go into dairy herds. So certainly Inglenook, in my view, is a success story for Moorabool Shire in that area. So anyone who's undertaken calf rearing knows that it's a fairly intensive sort of type exercise, and certainly an on-site presence on the site would assist with that sort of 3-week or 3-month sort of cycle, if you like. And certainly early days, I've certainly done it, is you're feeding calves twice a day for a start off, probably those first sort of 8 weeks, and then back to sort of a daily sort of feed. So yes, I suppose you could live in Ballarat and travel out and do calf sort of rearing, but best practice these days, in my view, is really to have an on-site presence with a dwelling to undertake that activity. Also, calves are very prone to getting scours, so you certainly need a sort of an on-site presence, to sort of look after them in those sort of early weeks, to deliver medicines and certainly electrolytes if scouring starts to happen. But so it's using the land. There's actually a feature dam that sort of straddles the two titles, so consolidating the two lots would be a good outcome in that regard too, where you can sort of manage the dam, and essentially it's preventing sort of the selling off of these two lots. And we talk about sort of fragmenting farmland, so this proposal, in my view, has a number of positive aspects to it. In a planning sense, it's in an area designated by council through policy sort of to support housing on 8-hectare allotments in this particular area, so it sort of complies with council's rural growth policy in that regard as well. So, look, that's all I need to say, Mr Chairman, about the application, but I'm happy to take questions, and certainly Mr Bedgeby's here to take any questions that councillors might have to put to him as well.
Thank you, Mr Hayden. Councillor Tatchell.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Good to see you, Mr Hayden. There's been a lot written and a lot in the news of late about potty calves and the changes that have been made around the world in terms of the culling rate. A lot of it to do with transportation on farms that are outside the peri-urban, where the actual cost of getting the livestock into the market or to the for want of a better word, the abattoirs, and the fact that the steers are being born. And I see that New Zealand and places like that are actually putting rules in place to eliminate that, because I think we're down to about 25%. But that may be right. Mr Begley might be able to answer that. So I suppose my question is, do you think that's relevant today, that if we are to fall in line with the rest of the world in terms of how we deal with our calves, especially the steer versions of the problem, because obviously we have a land issue in terms of rearing steers for market. So are we going to see more and more of this, and then maybe is this a boutique industry that will fit into the peri-urban?
It's certainly a very, it's a good question. It's a very sought after industry at the moment with respect to, I certainly know, obviously from a dairy farming point of view, the heifers are the important calves that go into our dairy farms.
It is woman's world, isn't it?
It is. But also in market terms, heifer, sort of dairy cows or heifers sought after very much so at the moment in market, and certainly a lot are going out through Portland to overseas countries, including China, as heifers as well. So in a world sense, they're sought after, yeah. So unfortunately the boys, yes, the steers are usually just grown out and sold in the markets, so they don't perhaps have the same value as the heifer calves. But in a boutique sort of sense, there's quite a strong industry, yeah, sort of emerging, yeah.
That's all I've got, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Minari.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in regards to numbers of calves on the property, I don't know if I picked up on how many sort of maximum number that the client would be holding.
It's about in the application 25 to 30, and that's over a 3-month cycle. That's the cycle that you take to sort of potty calves, take them from the cows, raise them. So it's a 3-month cycle essentially. So you're sort of getting potentially 4 cycles a year. So it's a bit more than just 25 or 30 calves. So it's times 4 over a 12-month sort of period. Yeah. So it adds up a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions for Mr Hayden? Mr Hayden, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
So, Councillor, item 7.1, for the use of a dwelling ancillary shed at Tierney's Road, Dunstown, there was a recommendation for refusal. I'm in your hands.
I'd like to move an alternative recommendation of approval as circulated.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik.
Mr Mayor, I would second it with some additional points under permit notes, if that was acceptable to the mover. And I'll read those out if you wish.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Under the permit note, the one that's listed would just nominate as 1. And then 2 would be, this permit for use and development is conditional. All permit conditions need to be complied with and are enforceable. And point 3, Council will monitor ongoing compliance with the stated objectives and outcomes of the farm management plan forming part of this permit.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. So, councillors, I'm in your hands. We have a alternate motion that's been moved by Councillor Dudzik and with amendments, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Any objections, councillors?
Yeah, I object, Mr Mayor.
Okay, councillors, we have a motion that's been moved and seconded, and we have an objection. So, Councillor Dudzik, I'll invite you to take the floor, and the floor is yours.
This application is an application which is supporting a farm business. It's enabling a family to live on site while they're caring for their cattle. We need to realise that it's got to be done better in person. I remember when my father-in-law, he actually owned a farm, and when he was on holidays, we had to, I probably shouldn't go on, we had to look after the cows, and that was my first experience of pulling a calf out of a cow's backside when I actually got peed on. So I can actually see the value in people living on site when they're breeding calves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Well, look, no, these decisions aren't always easy, and one of the good things about this proposal is that it is proposing to amalgamation of land, which I commend. However, what I'd like to point out to councillors is that this is not in the township. It is not rural living context as put in by the submission. My concerns are that whilst we continue to allow all these smaller lots to have houses built on them, they become less usable. I ask myself some simple questions such as, is this unusable farming land? Well, actually, no, it's not. It's actually very usable farming land. It actually has 20 megalitre dam, which will actually support a lot of growth. It is very high first hole land, and the likelihood that we will continue to get the best out of that land as farming will diminish if we continue to allow houses on each of these small lots. Whilst they are smallish lots in their own right, 20 hectares, every time we put a house on it diminishes the ability to have multiple lots used by a single person, right? And that's what these days the farming requires. So we really put at risk the continued farming purposes within Moorabool. It's no different to the market gardens in Bacchus Marsh, that they abut right up to the township. You can look over people's back fences and there's a market garden. If we started subdividing that, we'd lose farming pretty quickly. So on balance, I just think that this is not a great proposal and will end up in the long term detriment to farming within Moorabool.
Councillor Sullivan, as a secondary, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I commend this recommendation to council. I would ask the council to look at the aerial photograph that's on page 7 of our report, which clearly shows the property outlined in blue and the two parcels that form part of this property. And it's actually proximity to the Dunstown Township itself. And I think it's probably fair to say the area to the east of Tierney's Road, extending north up to Old Melbourne Road, is an area that obviously smaller holdings with dwellings on a considerable number of them, as compared to the area of the land to the west of Tierney's Road, which is, I would suggest, probably more broadly used in broad acre agriculture. I think we also have to bear in mind that this also affords an opportunity for a young person to actually engage in agriculture. The reality is the price of agricultural land in this shire is quite high and makes it very difficult for a young person to actually get in and engage in agriculture. It's an opportunity, a toehold, if you will, to actually get into agriculture and start a business. Because to buy a full working farm at the moment, you're looking at millions and millions of dollars, because that's the cost of farmland in this shire. So this is an opportunity for people to become involved. And I think it is a niche use, as noted, but it is one that it's a productive use of a small parcel of land. And we have to, I think, what is emerging in this going forward in our shire is we have to sort of look at the productivity rather than the viability. Productivity to make sure the land is productively used, and I think that's what this allows it to do. So, councillors, I would commend the recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. To conclude the debate, as the mover of the alternate motion, Councillor Dudzik, with the amendments, I invite you to close the debate, please.
Just a point of order, Mr Mayor. You might want to afford the other councillors an opportunity to speak to the item.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions or to speak on the item, please? Councillor Tatchell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. There's a bit of deja vu going on tonight, isn't there? Look, it's at some point we have to accept that we're going through some fairly extreme changes in decentralisation, and what we once knew as farming is changing, and we need to find ways of becoming or maintaining that agricultural presence as best we can. And we can learn a lot of lessons from Melbourne when they sort of converted themselves from rural farming area. And those of us who've got enough grey in our filtering through our hair would probably remember those days in Melbourne and understand that the mess afterwards and how difficult it was to clean up the mess in terms of weeds. And anyone who travels on the train to Melbourne would well understand what I'm saying. There is a move around the world for boutique agriculture. As we populate and we get more and more people and everyone wants to live within an hour of the city, and we have the luxury of being caught between two cities in Ballarat and Melbourne. And if we looked at this 10 years ago, when I probably had less grey hair, we had somewhere around the 520, 530 agricultural farms that were of a reasonable size that would feed a family of two. And of course, having come from the bush myself, from the Western District, we know if you don't do something about it. I lived in a town that had 800 people. When I grew up, there's 46 people there today. And that's because we didn't understand what the change was. Farms got bigger, and then the farms that couldn't get bigger became boutique farms. And have been watching New Zealand of all places, because I don't think we learn much from New Zealand, funny enough, but on this one I think they're right. They don't often get it right. But they understood that if you continue to put out calves and your costs of taking them to market outweigh the culling, we're actually doing damage to an industry. Here's an opportunity within the peri-urban to not only boutique the industry but create a new industry, because those rules will come into effect inevitably. The rights of animals will continue to grow, and we will have to find ways of dealing with that. And the reality is that people in peri-urban regions can only grow so much in terms of what they do with their calves, and they have to cull at the moment. So I see this as a fantastic opportunity to, we're down to about 412 properties now that are agricultural, which is 100 less than where we were 10 years ago. So, the trend's not going to change. I mean, if we're going to have another 10,000 people just in this region in the next 10 years, and we're going to have another 18,000 people in Bacchus Marsh, we're running out of farmland anyway. So every opportunity that we get where we can create this boutique agriculture or create a new form of agriculture, and I note tonight there's probably 3 or 4 items in here that are continually coming up since we requested that report on what the future of agriculture and planning is in our region. And when that finally arrives, I think it'll be clearer on what we can and what we can't do, what is agriculture, what is not agriculture. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for Mirrabul to take a stand and say, well, righto, we know what we are. We know that we need to plan for the future. We can be progressive and say, righto, this is a move forward. We also know, and as Councillor Sullivan said, take a look at the aerial view of Dunstown of where the allotments are, and the allotments that we've subdivided, probably some, as Councillor Edwards has said, probably wrongly in the past, where we've cut up some land up there in the Spud country. But this one in particular, if you look at it now, they're giving up some land to make this work. They're genuine about what they want to do. And I think we should be genuine in supporting their interests. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Councillors, any other councillors would like to speak on the item? Councillor Dudzik, I'll just invite you to close the debate.
Times are changing, businesses are changing. Not everyone has the same capacity in a business. There will be small businesses or small farms, and this allows opportunities for all people. This is still a farming opportunity. It's just on a different scale to other farms, and I do support that they wish to reside on the property.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Councillors, we have a alternate motion of approval, which has been moved by Councillor Dudzik and seconded by Councillor Sullivan with amendments. Councillors, all in favour of the alternate motion of approval? Against? Motion carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to thank you to Mr Hayden too for as our registered speaker. Item 7.2 is the use and development of a dwelling and auxiliary outbuilding at 110 Pound Creek Road, Navigators. We have our registered speaker, which is Mr David Collins. Mr Collins, would you like to take the table, please?
Good evening, councillors. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak about our planning application for 110 Pound Creek Road, Navigators. My name's David Collins and this is my partner, Kath Elzinga. Our reason for coming tonight is simply to ask you to reconsider our application. My family's connection with this land runs quite deep. We've owned it since 1975. My father's ashes are there. We've seen people stay in the Navigators area and we've seen people come and go from the area. In the 48 years that we've owned the land, there have not been any approaches made by farming interests to purchase the property to extend agricultural use. We have good relationships with our neighbours on both sides and at the rear of the property, which are all hobby farms. They are aware of our plans and have made no objection. When my dad purchased the land in 1975, he had the intention of building a family home there and setting up a harness racing business. Unfortunately, he died in 2015 without having achieved that. Knowing that, you know, I shared that dream with him and we trained harness racing horses together for many years, he left the property and his horses to us. I've bred and trained harness racers over many years and worked for professional trainers in my 20s before I became a mental health nurse. In 2019, I approached the council about the prospect of establishing a home and a harness horse training and breeding facility on the site. My interactions with the planning department, both on the phone and down at the Darley office, were encouraging. I had a really sort of good, positive feel from the planning duty planner that I spoke with on separate occasions. I felt even more encouraged by the granting of permits for dwellings in Pound Creek Road, a racehorse agistment property in Navigators and a harness racing property in Bungaree. Our proposed development didn't seem outside the norm of what the planning department had been approving, so on that basis I put in a planning permit application. We believe we've put forward what's an appropriate use of the land. It will bring economic benefit to the Moorabool community in the form of building works. There's plenty of costs with equines, as councillors would probably appreciate. There's shoeing, there's feeding, all that sort of thing, which, you know, this area supports that production and those services. There's also agricultural outlay that is required to maintain and improve land, and of course domestic spending for day-to-day living. As outlined in the plan, we believe the residence is essential for the success of this type of enterprise, and the main reasons are outlined, and additional reasons are outlined in the farm management plan. But essentially, it's about the safety and welfare of our foals and horses in training. Care of the land is very important to us. We really enjoy the natural native beauty of this land. It's a beautiful place, and it's got beautiful manor gums that are hundreds of years old, and you know, we want to sort of keep that feel about the place. We've replanted you know, species to the area that are indigenous to the area, and we want to make the place a model property, a good looking property that's you know, stands out nicely and fits in well with the area. We want the house, we plan for the house to be light on the land and small and off-grid. The land capability assessment that's been done by AGR is supportive of the dwelling. We've spent time developing the land and preparing it for such an event where we're able to build a home on it and start a business up. We've removed rubbish and weeds, re-fenced, re-vegetated, resurfaced the road to the rear of the property and reconditioned the trotting track. All this work's been to the value of approximately $100,000, and we believe this demonstrates that we're committed. We've lodged the planning application in all sincerity with no intention of speculation. We're community-minded people, and if we're able to live in the community, we'll contribute to the community. And we're very happy for council to hold us to account around the farm management plan. Yes, so yeah, can I finish by saying thank you for giving us time to state our case? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Councillors, I'll throw open the floor. Any councillors have an opportunity to question Mr. Collins? No? All right, thank you. So, councillors, again, I'm in your hands. Councillors, we have a recommendation to issue a refusal to this application.
I'd like to move an alternative recommendation of approval as circulated to councillors, and I believe Councillor Sullivan will have similar to the previous item.
So we have an alternate motion moved by Councillor Dudzik. Let's call for a second.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I would second the alternate recommendation with the additional 2 dot points that I put forward with the previous application. I think it was 7.1, which related to just permit notes relating to the condition, basically the farm management plan. Similar to that, if that's okay. Do you want me to read that again? I can if you wish. Or...
Councillors, any questions on the amendments? No. So we have an alternate motion that's been moved with amendments and seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Councillors, any objections? All in favour? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Councillors, item 7.3 is a 2-lot subdivision, re-subdivision at 229 Smiths Road, Parwin. Again, we have a registered speaker. The registered speaker, Miss Christie, is representing the applicant. Sorry, I beg your pardon, she's online. There she is.
Evening, can you hear me?
On mute too.
Miss Christie, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. Evening, councillors. I act on behalf of the applicant for the proposed re-subdivision. The subject site currently consists of 4 separate allotments and contains 2 dwellings. It is proposed to realign the boundaries, consolidating and re-subdividing the land from 4 lots into 2 lots. The subdivision will provide 2 lots with areas of 40 hectares and 80 hectares, each containing an existing dwelling. The objection has raised issue with the application, resulting in the intensification of residential use on the land. However, both dwellings on the site are existing. The proposal is for the consolidation and re-subdivision of the lots only. No additional development is proposed. As such, there will be no intensification or additional reverse amenity impacts as a result of the proposal. And given the minimum subdivision area of 100 hectares provided in the schedule to the farm zone, the land is unlikely to be further subdivided in the future. The proposed re-subdivision will have no impact on the agricultural capability of the subject site or the surrounding land, and will effectively reduce land fragmentation in line with the objectives of the farm zone. There is no impact on the airport environs or environmental significance overlays, given there is no intensification. And the application was referred to the VPA, whose response indicated that the proposal would not impact the delivery of the future Parwin employment precinct. So it is considered that the proposal is minor in nature, consistent with the relevant planning policies in place at this time, and as such is appropriate in these circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Christie. Councillors, any questions for Ms Christie? Councillor Tatchell.
I'll move the recommendation if you like, Mr Mayor.
Motion's moved by Councillor Tatchell. Anyone care to second the motion? Councillor Berry. Councillors, any objections? All in favour? Carried. Thank you, Ms Christie.
Thank you.
Councillors, item 7.4 is a two-lot subdivision, re-subdivision at 506 Bungaree Creswick Road, Patilla. Councillors, we have a registered speaker, Mr Hayden. I'd like invite Mr Hayden to move to the table to address council. Councillors, we also have a written submission from Mr Hayden, which you've received. Any questions regarding the written submission? No? All right, Mr Hayden, again, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mr Chairman. Thanks, councillors. I've been involved with this one from the start. Mr and Mrs Gordon acquired this property. It was called the Rogers property. They must have been sort of old landowners in that particular area, and it was called the Rogers Homestead or the Rogers Block. Now, probably the most telling thing, councillors, is the diagram that you can sort of see there, the aerial. So it's a property that's comprised in two separate titles, so that means that both titles could be sold off tomorrow, if you like. But curiously, the yellow line represents where the common boundary is between the two titles. And the most striking thing that sort of came to me as I looked at it first off was that it's a strange shape for a start off. I don't know why it's like that, but it effectively runs through a large irrigation dam on the property. So in terms of any sort of attempt to fence that common boundary would prove a little bit difficult in terms of how you string a fence across a dam. I have seen it done, but it's not exactly an effective sort of stock mechanism to sort of do it that way. So the application is simply, in the most simple terms, to realign the boundary to represent where the blue line is, which really follows an existing fence line. So it's really two titles for two titles. It's not an application that creates any more titles or, you know, sort of further fragments the land or anything of that nature. As councillors will know, it's Patilla. It's probably some of the stuff around Dunstown's pretty good too, but certainly in a farming sense, it's probably some of the highest quality farmland probably in the state in terms of its versatility. You can pretty much, some farmers would say, eat it, but certainly it lends itself to not just sort of grazing livestock, fattening lambs, you know, sort of breeding cows and calves, and of course it's traditionally been used for potato farming as well and cropping. So it's very versatile agricultural land. But at the end of the day, with this application, the land's the land. So we're really effectively just moving a line in terms of where the boundaries are between two lots. And there's, you know, obviously the wetland down in the bottom sort of part of the land, which is quite wet. It would sort of put all that wetland sort of area into one lot. There's also a bore that's located outside the existing title arrangement, so that bore for the house would be brought into the lot that has the existing house sort of on it. So I can't say much more about it other than it's really moving an existing boundary to a new location, which the application says that's a better or more orderly sort of planning outcome. So that's it, councillors. Unless there's any questions, I can't probably say too much more than that, Mr Mayor, on that application.
Thank you, Mr Hayden. Councillor Minari.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Hayden, I just wanted to ask, do you know roughly when the dwelling was built?
The dwelling, as I understand it, was probably a late 50s dwelling, so it's an older dwelling, a nice weatherboard sort of farmhouse, so it's been there quite a while, yeah, and you can sort of see the other infrastructure sort of around it, sheds and so forth. So it's been there a while.
And they've always formed it as just one parcel, really. You can see the fence lines aren't even sort of matching up to the... No,
there's no resemblance to the yellow line to any existing fences or paddocks or anything. It's just some curious sort of alignment of a boundary, essentially.
Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, my questions of officers, I just want to confirm that if that was to be realigned and sold off, that if a building was to be proposed on the site that doesn't currently have a building, it would require a permit.
So through the chair, that's correct. So that's lot 1, the vacant lot would require a planning permit for a dwelling.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions for Mr Hayden? Councillor Sullivan? No. No further questions? Okay, thank you, Mr Hayden.
Thank you. Just before closing, my client would like to keep open the possibility of making an application for a dwelling on the vacant lot, which they have open to them at the moment. However, Mr Chairman, they have agreed to no further subdivision if that was minded of the council to grant a permit, that they would agree to both lots not being able to be further subdivided in the future. So they would agree to that as a condition.
Any Councillor Sullivan?
No, I was just going to, there is an alternate recommendation has been circulated, Mr Mayor, so I was just going to refer to that.
In response to that, Mr Hayden, that would follow due process at the time, any further applications that were made?
Yeah, that's right. There'd have to be another application made for a dwelling. So it's not as of right to just build another house. It would be another process.
That's right.
That would have to come back to council.
So, councillors, as noted by Councillor Sullivan, we do have a recommendation to refuse, but we have an alternate motion that's been tabled by Councillor Dudzik.
I'd like to move the alternative motion of approval of the re-subdivision.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Councillors, any objections? All in favour? Carried. Thank you again, Mr Hayden. So, councillors, we'll move to item 7.5.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor. Can I just note that all the applicants will receive a copy of the alternate at the end of the night? Is that correct?
I believe that to be the case. Yes?
Yep, just so then. Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7.5, councillors, is a variation of a restricted covenant at 10 Parkside Drive, Hopeton Park. Again, councillors, we have a registered speaker, and I'd like to invite Kathy Carolumbus to take the chair, please.
Hi. A year and a half ago, we applied to get this shed done. We did have a complaint which has now been withdrawn. In the meantime, we've spoken to all our immediate neighbours, including Erie Court, that are all fine with the shed. Yeah, so we just want to know what's happening. We've lost like maybe $10,000 because the sheds have gone up in this year and a half as well. We've had no other complaints. So, yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. Councillors, any questions for Kathy or the applicant? As the applicant, please.
Just have one, if I may.
Councillor Sullivan.
Yes, thank you for your... Are there any other sheds of a similar size that's been proposed in the estate that you're aware of?
Everywhere. Like Hopeton Park, we go for walks every day. Like I reckon 10 are getting built right now, bigger than what we want. So I don't know how they got approved, but that's why we moved there as well. We had called the council before putting an offer in the property and they said, yep, not a problem. Bought the house and then here we are 2 years later, still fighting.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillors, any further questions for Kathy? Thank you. Councillors, we have a recommendation to issue a refusal to grant the planning permit, but again, Councillor Dudzik has an alternate recommendation.
I'd like to move an alternative recommendation of approval as circulated.
Councillor Tatchell, second the motion. Councillors, any objections?
I do have a question, if that's all right.
Yes, Councillor Sullivan.
If this alternate motion were to proceed, does it give any parties the right to object to VCAT?
Mr Bazuznet or Mr Lovell?
So with no objections at present, there is no sort of appeal rights from other parties. So that's beneficiaries and non-beneficiaries to the covenant.
Okay.
Thank you. So, councillors, we have a mover for an alternate motion of approval and a seconded. All in favour? Carried. Councillors, item 7.6 is for the removal of native vegetation at 3 Main Street, Gordon. Councillors, you'll note in your packs that we have no registered speakers, but we have 4 written objections. Councillors, just to open the floor, is there any questions?
Can we turn the aircon back on?
Yep. Sorry, Ms Stapleton was a registered speaker. Is she now online?
Through the chair, I believe she's an apology.
She's an apology, yeah. Okay, but I will note that we do have the 4 written submissions by objectors, which councillors has been circulated. Mr Bazudinad has offered to take any questions councillors may have in regards to those written submissions. Councillor Minari.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just have some questions which I don't know whether Mr Bazudinad is going to be able to answer these, but I just thought I'd throw it out there. In one of the conditions, it says no excavation or heavy machinery, construction works or activity. I understand that I've had arborists out many times, and I know that they often will use a small heavy machinery to move around, grab branches, all that sort of thing. So does that relate to that, or is that in terms of moving soil around?
Mark, you happy to take that question, please?
Yeah, so through the chair, the excavation condition is protection of the retained trees while the trees that are recommended for removal are removed from the site. So in other words, that those trees aren't damaged, or their soil, whether it be soil removal or damage to those trees occur during that period. Once the trees are removed, tree protection zones can come down from those existing trees that are to be retained.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions regarding the written submissions? Okay, councillors, we have a recommendation of a decision to grant this planting permit for the removal of the native vegetation. Councillors, I'm in your hands. Councillor Dudzik.
Can we turn the air conditioning on?
Councillor Tatchell.
Yeah, I've got a question. I didn't see an alternate recommendation from Councillor Dudzik. Is there one there? Or?
No, there's not one.
I just wanted to check.
Councillors, we have a recommendation to grant the planting permit in your hands, councillors.
Mr Mayor, just got a question, Mr Mayor. Considering the applicant originally wanted to remove all the trees at the frontage and we've sort of taken every second one, did we get a response from the applicant with the proposal that council has come back with?
Mark.
So through the chair, if you do read the delegate report, the applicant did review the recommendation, and they suggested they preferred 8 of the retained trees to be removed.
Okay.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Sullivan?
No question, Mr Mayor. I would actually move the recommendation with the notice of decision to grant a permit.
Moved by Councillor Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Tatchell. Councillors, any objections? All in favour? Motion is carried. Thank you. Before we hear item 7.7, I'd just like to invite those members of the gallery that have no further involvement in the meeting. You are free to leave.
Will they get a copy of the...
It's a bit more comfortable.
It's just a balance, sorry, it's just a balance between the noise.
Yeah. Okay, councillors, we'll continue the meeting. Item 7.7 is an amendment to use and development of a service station in accordance with the endorsed plans at 101 Gisborne Road, Bacchus Marsh.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor. The other side of the page.
Yep.
Oh, right.
So, councillors, we have a registered speaker on this item, and I'd like to invite Mr John Crosman to the table. Thank you, John.
Good evening, everyone. My name's John Crossman. I'm a Senior Team Manager with Ambulance Victoria. I've been one of the 2 Senior Team Managers that looks after the Moorabool LGA since 2010. I've been ambulance paramedic since 1996, and I'm representing Ambulance Victoria today. I'm also terrified of public speaking, so please bear with me. Yeah, good. Ambulance Victoria moved into its current location at 102 Gisborne Road, Bacchus Marsh, back in 2018. I note on page 76 on the aerial diagram that they've just missed where it is, either intentionally or otherwise. But we're just in that white bit below where you can see Gisborne Road running north-south. We were very happy with the selection of this site as it offered better access to the suburb of Darley while maintaining access to Bacchus Marsh, Manningley and Parwin. It also enabled us to have improved access to the freeway and as such improved access to other parts of the LGA as required, such as Mooneyong and Balan, as well as access to the Melton LGA where a lot of my cars often work and find themselves. When the proposal for the original development across the road was received, Ambulance Victoria raised concerns based on increased traffic flow along Gisborne Road, particularly northbound to the freeway and into Darley. At the time we met with representatives, presumably from the developer, Department of Transport and Vic Roads, and we were assured that traffic flow wishing to travel north from that facility would be merged with the northbound traffic signs and lane development would prevent cars from travelling south from this point, and that cars wishing to travel south would have to access Gisborne Road via Clifton Drive. We were assured that the existing keep clear zones adjacent to Clifton Drive and Layla Court, which is where the ambulance isn't shown, but it is actually where we access Gisborne Road from, would be increased in size, repainted, and that signs indicating the presence of an adjacent ambulance station would be erected. And we were happy with these assurances. When we received the application that we're referring here to today, we again have raised concerns, not necessarily on what is being proposed, but on further traffic and exacerbation of the current issues that we are currently experiencing when accessing northbound. Traffic routinely turns south out of the northbound lane, even though we were assured that they couldn't. Gisborne Road is now further clogged with cars wishing to travel north and waiting at the red light across the freeway, as is Clifton Drive for cars wishing to travel south. And this might not be such an issue if the keep clear zones were adhered to, but they're not. They've never been repainted, increased in size or modified in any way, nor are there any signs indicating the presence of an ambulance station. And I suspect that this failure to adhere to keep clear zones is in part driver behaviour, but also in part the fact that the painting on the roads is so faded that sometimes drivers don't actually realise that they're on a keep clear zone until they're on it. Ambulance, unlike VicPol and fire services and the SES, do not always respond using lights and sirens. In fact, legislatively, we can't actually do that for the majority of our cases. So I would suggest that about 50% of our cases are non-urgent responses. So they're responded to in normal road conditions. And as a result, we have a combination of circumstances that are making it increasingly difficult for our ambulances to respond to them effectively. Ambulances wishing to travel north approach the intersection of Gisborne Road and Leela Court, and the northbound lanes are full. The keep clear zone has traffic on it or on part of it, making it impossible to actually turn, and to be honest, unless those keep clear zones are actually made bigger, the length of an ambulance is actually going to prevent them from turning fully anyway. Meaning that the back half of an ambulance is sitting out exposed to southbound traffic. And so effectively what we find ourselves in is a situation where between, say, 8 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock at night on weekdays, we're totally dependent on waiting for the lights to change and then someone nice to let us in. We are hoping that the further raising of this issue with Council may assist us to have it further raised with the necessary parties in order to have the keep clear zones increased in size and repainted at the very least. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Councillors, any question for Mr Crosman? Councillor Berry.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. John, I noted that you said that not all calls are urgent, so they're non-urgent. So then would you say some of those could become urgent if you're waiting there for so long to get out of the station?
Well, our troops clear the ambulance station pretty quickly. Our issue is actually sitting there waiting to turn north. There's always a potential, depending on what we're actually dispatched to and the accuracy of the information that's provided the call to the OOO call taker, and that's always been the case regardless of what case you are going to. Sometimes you can go code 1 to cases that aren't acute at all, and sometimes you can go on a non-urgent case and find out that it's completely the opposite when you get there. We have an expectation that our crews arrive within a non-urgent but urgent but non-urgent case. So we essentially, in an emergency sense, classify our cases into code 1s, 2s and 3s. 1s require lights and sirens, 2s require normal road conditions but get there in 20 to 25 minutes, and code 3 is get there within an hour. My concern is around our code 2 cases and responding to those. An example of one of those may be headache. Someone with a headache, you might think, well, that's a headache, but it could be a stroke. It could be that the person providing the information might not have actually provided the correct information to elicit the correct responses from the ESTA call taker to get that. An elderly person who's fallen on the floor and can't get up is a code 2 case, and so they will wait until we can get there. And I would like them to get there sooner rather than later.
Yep. Thank you.
Tatchell.
Firstly, I reckon you guys do a fantastic job. Tell me something, in the city, like, where the traffic is horrendous and the keep clear zones seem to be larger, and there seems to be a better system there where ambulance always seem to be able to get out. What would need to be done there to make sure you had exactly that? So, like, and more than just a white light, because people, the sad fact is that people just ignore it. But do they have a system in the city that I haven't seen that actually stops people from interfering with that space?
Some stations, many, are placed in service roads adjacent to main roads where their access is better. I mean, the issue that we... and some co-locate with fire stations where they actually have traffic control signals. And that's the thing we find when comparing ambulance to, say, fire. They're big and red and loud and scary, and no one's going to get in their way because they'll get squashed. And no one's going to stand in front of a police station and keep clear because you'll probably get booked. We can't do either of those. So placement of ambulance stations is always fairly carefully considered in terms of access and egress and the opportunity to actually drive through from the rear of the station, which is what we've got here. The challenge that we have in particular with this road is that it's the main thoroughfare between Bendigo and Geelong, as we all know, as well as catering for local traffic and someone potentially just, driving from Gisborne down to the beach. So it's busy all the time. And in an ideal world, we would get traffic lights. But as a starting point, what we were assured of getting back in 2019 was a good place to start. If they're big and wide and yellow and signposted, generally drivers are pretty nice with ambulance anyway. which is why I was being diplomatic and saying that generally they pull up on it and then they might be looking down and go, oh, I'm on to keep clear. Sometimes, maybe they weren't, I don't know. I can't speak for the drivers themselves, but certainly would make a start, that was for sure.
Just supplementary, Mr. So you've been there since 2019?
I've been there since we moved into that place in 2018, and I've been stationed at Bacchus Marsh since 2012.
So in your opinion, was it poorly placed to start with? Or?
I think it was an excellent selection. I didn't select it. I mean, just putting it out there, I didn't choose it.
But take the credit when you can get it.
But I still think it was a good spot. I mean, you need to consider how best to access your community, and then access the ancillary parts of where your service delivery is. And for us, that's backup for Ballan, set backup for Murniong, Greendale, Blackwood, Gisborne, and then Melton. And proximity to the freeway is really, really good. I mean, we were in Main Street and then having to drive down the Avenue of Honour to get to Melton all the time. This is a much better option.
Just one more if I may.
Yep, Councillor Tatchell.
So how big area do you guys cover? Because I know you get moved around a lot. How big area do you actually have to...
Ambulance isn't really like fire. We don't go and put the fire out and come back. We start and then we go and go and go and go and go and then we finish. So sometimes we can be fortunate enough to pick a patient up, take them to, say, Sunshine Hospital and then come back. More often than not, you may then get another case because you're closest in Sunshine, and then you might take that one to hospital and then you find that you're in Greenvale, not Greendale, Greenvale. And then you might clear the Northern Hospital and be closest to somewhere else. So that's kind of how it rolls with us. The furthest I've ever been away from Bacchus Marsh while working on the Bacchus Marsh ambulance is Berwick. I've been to Frankston, Dandenong, Springvale, Wattle Glen. Yeah.
I don't go that far beyond that.
It's sometimes a compass and a water bottle to get home, yeah.
Councillors, any other questions for Mr Crosman? John, I have one if I may. Noting your concerns about the painting on the roads and the signage, has Ambulance Victoria advocated to Vic Roads or Regional Roads Victoria to have those addressed?
Yes, we have. And I've tried to raise it and get some assistance through the Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee. I have had contacts in Vic Roads and have sent a number of emails and had no reply. Yeah,
I will say, and it's not, I suppose, relevant to the matter at hand, but I'm sure Council can advocate on your behalf as well. So, Councillor Dudzik.
Were there any commitments made towards the ambulance through when you submitted the planning permits of improvements that were going to happen to the road? Did anyone say things were going to happen and they didn't?
When the original station was developed, I don't know. The planning permit and the overall branch design. The selection of the site was handled by our property department in conjunction with more senior paramedics or operational staff than me. I still think the site was a good one. But in terms of planning and permits and such, that was organised through Department of Health. It wasn't organised through me, so I can't really answer, Council. I'm sorry.
If there's no further questions for Mr Crosman, I thank him for his time and more particularly too, thank you for your commitment to the health and wellbeing of public safety since 1996, which I think is coming up to 27 years, so thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
So, councillors, regarding item 7.7, we do have a recommendation for refusal to grant the amended planning permit. I'm in your hands, councillors. Councillor Tatchell.
Mr Mayor, could I move to defer this item and see if we can come up with a better solution? I just think there's a solution there somewhere.
Councillors, I'm in your hands. Councillor Minari.
Can I just ask a question for Councillor Tatchell? In regards, would it relate to Ambulance Victoria? Or are you just talking about the application itself?
Yeah, I think so. I think the solution here is with Ambulance Victoria. And that's why I asked the questions about Melbourne. I mean, because they would have had exactly the same issues. So I just think that we could, I mean, barring making a decision we'll regret, even though it might fit the box, maybe we could explore, at least explore another channel.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Nothing further, Councillor Minari?
No.
Councillor Berry.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I was just flagging that I was putting something up in general business later to support the ambulance. I think the actual refusal on this positioning is about a different matter, about the drive-through behind the, well, it's not Oporto anymore, the chicken place. So I'd like us to look at this matter on the table first.
Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan.
Mr Mayor, I think the request to defer it is at cross purpose as to what the actual matter at hand is to refuse this application. The ambulance are an objector to this application. I think the other matters that are being canvassed are quite legitimate but don't actually relate to what's before us, that's all. Let's make that point.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. So, councillors, we have a recommendation for refusal, but we have a motion to defer from Councillor Tatchell. Is there a seconder to that motion? No? Okay, councillors, motion lost. So we now have a recommendation to issue a refusal.
I'd like to move the recommendation in the council papers to refuse the item.
So, motion has been moved by Councillor Dudzik. Any seconders, council? Councillor Berry? All in favour? Carried. Thank you, councillors, and thank you to Mr Crossman. Thank you. Councillors, that completes item 7. Item 8, councillors, is an update on trends, issues and other matters. Mr Bazudnout?
No update, Mr Mayor.
No update. Item number 9 is the Process Forward and Work Program.
Also don't have any updates there.
No further updates. And item 10, update on VCAT decisions.
No updates, Mr Mayor.
Item 11, other business. Councillors? Councillor Berry?
Yes, I have an item I'd like to flag. If we could, and it's in relation to 7.7, if we could write to the Department of Transport for them to investigate Gisborne Road, Clifton Drive, the area around the ambulance Victoria Bacchus Marsh station.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. I was just seeking advice whether that to be noted or moved, but that has been moved by Councillor Berry. Councillors, anyone want to second that?
I'll second it.
Councillor Dudzik. Councillors in favour of? Thank you, councillors. Carried.
I just have a question in relation to that. Could we, if we go further down this, could we actually see what the permit for the ambulance station itself actually said and what the requirements of that were? Because we don't know what that may have been. I think it would be useful and inform the debate if we knew what the conditions on the permit for the ambulance station were, because anyway, that would be very helpful, I think.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. That has been noted. Councillor Dudzik.
Could we also do a check on the existing planning permit of that site, the Hungry Jack's site, and check that all the requirements of that permit have been met in relation to traffic?
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. That's been noted. Councillors, any other business? No, I thank you for your time and I thank those that have attended the meeting. I thank officers, and our next meeting will be on Wednesday the 15th of March. Meeting's closed.